Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the other big time games, a ranked matchup in Lincoln, Nebraska this Friday. Going to be so much fun. Cannot wait for that one, and might just have a lot to do with what the Big Ten is going forward. But let's get into some questions around this upcoming weekend and just kind of around college football in general, because there's a number of things happening behind the scenes, and that's where we'll start. Oh, excuse me. That is where we'll start. We'll start with Billy Napier because there has been a number of stuff happening around him. Obviously, coming off the loss to A&M, it was almost assumed that he would be fired over the next 48 hours. In fact, I said very, very confidently on Monday that he would not be on the flight to Starkville. He will almost definitely be on the flight to Starkville, and that adds a very interesting debate to this because Pete Thamel was on SportsCenter a couple of days ago, and he said it doesn't seem like the people inside this program have the same urgency to let Billy Napier go as the fan base does. And frankly, it's rarely that case. There's rarely an administration that is as inkling to get a guy out as the fan base is. But that being said, there's something to be said about him being the coach throughout the rest of the year. I know that sounds crazy where they have been the first couple of weeks, but this is a really complicated question that goes well beyond what he's done on the football field. Florida right now has an interim president. They have someone that likely could be the president going forward, but maybe you go out and find someone else. On the other side of this, they have a guy in Scott Strickland as their AD. He might not be around once that next president comes into town. So do you want to give him that power? Do you want him to give him the hiring power over your next football coach if he's not going to be around for that football coach to be around? So that's the big time question here. Do you ride Billy Napier until the very end? Do you say we're gonna take this year as a wash? We're gonna figure out what's going on with this program, but at the end of the day, he's going to be out the door. It's just going to have to be at the end of the year with all of the different stuff happening behind the scenes. Does make it a lot tougher. And then the other part of this question is obviously who would possibly take over for him and how would they go about that? Who would be the guy? Where would they turn? A lot of people have thrown out Lane Kiffin. I think he would take it. It's a lot of variables over there at Florida that we don't see right now that are a little bit worrisome. So there's so many different things that go into this. Eli Drinkwitz is another option. I think Glenn Schumann up there at Georgia at defensive coordinator is an option. There's a number of guys out there. Florida's not at that position where they can just point at the guy and he will immediately take the job. That's not where they are right now. That's where they can be in a couple of years. But as of right now, this is a program that has just too much stuff going on behind the scenes that I don't know if they can hire the next coach the way that a lot of people think they can. But that's obviously something will impact the rest of the season. And if Billy Napier's on the sideline, we'll see what happens throughout the rest of the year. But it's going to be really, really interesting and one of those weird lame duck coach situations, and those rarely end well. I'll just leave it at that for the time being. But what game has changed the most from week one? This is a funny thing that happens in week 4, week 5, where you have these games that you circle in the preseason. You have these games that say those are going to mean the most in week 3. Those are going to be the marquee matchups. And then you get here and they're totally different. And it's not necessarily to say they're not marquee matchups, but they're just a little bit different from terms of what we thought we were going to see. I think Clemson-NC State is a great example of this, where you have a team that was coming in with a lot of title hopes in NC State, Clemson trying to get back to where they were. I thought this was going to be one of the most important games in the ACC race all year, and maybe it still is to a certain extent, but as of right now, this NC State team comes in just limping a little bit, and I don't know if it's going to mean all that much at the end of the day if NC State keeps playing this way. And then you have a USC Michigan game that obviously you have to touch on. This is going to be one of those games that's so much fun to watch, but also kind of a reversal of roles going into this game. I thought when we came into this game, I was going to be saying, Michigan is going to be the more solid team, the more confident team, the one that I know more about. USC is going to be the team that is still finding themselves defensively and maybe even offensively with Miller Moss taking over. That has not been the case. It's been entirely flipped. Michigan looks a little bit lost while USC looks like a well-oiled machine, and we'll see what happens in that one, but cannot believe that this one got as different as it did. But the winner of this challenge by a mile is the Cal-Florida State game. This is a game that coming into the season, you would have thought, okay, Florida State can get a quick win, they can keep on with their ACC title race, and that'll be that. Cal's walking in as they're not the favorite in the books because rarely will you see Florida State not be a favorite at home, but they're the team that has the ACC odds. They're the team with the big time wins. They're the team that has Florida State on the ropes before they walk into the stadium. And frankly, that's been the case for pretty much every single Florida State game thus far. So this is one of those games that you're looking at one totally different direction this going into the season, that now Cal's the aggressor, and Florida State's the one that's trying to tread water and trying to stay alive in this conference. So crazy stuff. Another one, obviously, Nebraska Illinois is going to be tons of fun. I think Tennessee OU changed quite a bit after this. After a lot of changes around Tennessee just becoming world beaters. Kansas West Virginia felt like it could be for the Big 12 title. No longer. It feels like it's one that might just be forgotten about by the end of the year. The other question I have, are we crowning or burying teams just a little bit too fast? When we talk about this every single year, and really last year gave me a great argument for this, Bama was coming off the USF game this time last year. They were unsure who their quarterback was going forward. They knew that Jalen Milroe was the better quarterback. They didn't necessarily feel great about him going forward. Everyone was talking about how this is the worst Alabama team that we've seen. This is the team that is going to end, the run effectively. They're going to fall a couple of times in the regular season, especially after that Texas game. There was so much talk around them, and then they found it. Then they were able to hit that stride. Maybe that's Michigan this year. And I understand that they have quite a further way to go than what Alabama did a year ago, but what if Alex Orji just brings everything into alignment? And what if that's all they need? I know there's a number of issues with this team. They have to play Michigan football. The second they get back to Michigan football, at the very least, these kids will feel comfortable with what they're doing. These kids will know what they're doing going forward, and that's running the football. You're going to have to be able to run the football. You're going to have to play defense, and if you can't lean into that stuff, then you're going to have a problem. But I just think Michigan's one of those teams that has a little bit more in the tank than people are giving him credit for, and I cannot wait to see what they do the rest of the season. But overall, it's going to be absolutely incredible to watch. On the flip side of this, we might be crowning Tennessee just a touch too early. I think this Tennessee team is absolutely incredible and has every ability to make the CFP. The thing is, this is a very young quarterback that's about to go into his first year as a full starter in the SEC. This is a defense that is really good. The back end it does have a problem. When you go up against those elite offensive lines, are you going to be able to get home at the same rate? And if you can't, are your defense, is your back end going to get exposed? It's one of those teams that has played incredibly good football up to this point, no doubt about that. It hasn't been necessarily against great opponents, particularly defensively, and it hasn't necessarily been the aggressive atmospheres that Nico's going to walk into this weekend and going forward. So it's one of those teams that I feel really good about right now, but you have to then talk about the flip side. You have to talk about what could go wrong, and it might just be that star quarterback that has been so incredible through a couple of weeks looks a little clunky going forward. But it'll be interesting to watch that. What if the ACC is flipped on its head this Saturday? Because when you talk about the ACC, Clemson, NC State really does take the cake in terms of what's going to matter in the ACC race, but you have a number of other ones that could not only just mix this thing up just a little bit, but could flip it on its head entirely, where Georgia Tech heads up to Louisville. If Georgia Tech wins that game, things look a little bit different in that race from where we thought they were, at least as of right now. South Florida hosts Miami. If the Bulls get a win, then Miami is all over the place, and you're very confused about what this conference is going forward. Cal and FSU might not be the best game in the world, but if Cal wins, they're a real contender in the conference. If Florida State gets it done, there will be a very interesting conversation around Florida State, a very confusing, weird conversation. But at the end of the day, it's going to be really interesting to watch all these games unfold. And then you have out-of-conference games. You have Virginia Tech hosting Rutgers. You have a number of you have TCU at SMU. You have Michigan State at Boston College. All games that could go against you and have a little bit of an impact down the road. So it's going to be a really interesting week in the ACC, and I think one that we might just look back on and say, that might have had more of a bearing on the ACC race than much any other week throughout the season. But obviously, plenty more to go. Let's get into who we learn the most about this weekend. And I think there's a number of different conversations here. I think SMU is a team that we have to learn more about. They have not played really good football, but everything's still on the table for them, and they got a big one against TCU this upcoming weekend. And then you got other teams. You got Colorado. You're going to learn a ton about this team this upcoming weekend, coming off an emotional win, coming off a week that has been a little bit crazy around that program as it usually is, but a number of different things that have popped up. You're going to have to come ready. Dave Aranda is going to have his guys ready to roll, and you better be able to match their tune. So we're going to learn a lot about Colorado. They answered the bell last week. They're going to have to answer it again this week. And then I do think we're going to learn a ton about what Nico Imaliava is. I think he is the guy that, frankly, more than anyone in the country, I'm watching the closest, because it's not necessarily about, I don't trust him to be elite. He's absolutely incredible. It is to say, first true road game, an elite defensive coordinator and defense overall on the other side, an intense, aggressive crowd. All of these things can get in your way. All of these things can get in his way and create problems that he hasn't had to deal with yet. It's not to say that that's definitely going to happen, but you never really know what these guys are going to react like in that first true road game. He's going to have to be able to keep his poise about him, or it's going to be kind of a long day at the office in the weirdest possible way, where an offense that looked like world beaters through the first couple of weeks might just look benign because this quarterback cannot fully get it going. So we'll learn a lot about him. If he rolls out there and just absolutely tears them to pieces, it's going to be a really interesting conversation, including Heisman, around this kid. And then on the flip side, if he, falls on his face just a little bit, I wouldn't be overly surprised. And it'd be one of those things that would be really interesting to watch going forward with Tennessee. But what's the most fun game of the weekend? And I'm going to start with a little bit of a sicko pick, I'll be honest with you. If you watch Florida State at Mississippi State, or if you watch Florida at Mississippi State, bless your soul. I genuinely, I don't know how you can watch these two teams right now. I don't know how these fan bases are even going to tune into this game. This is going to be one of the ugliest games in the world. That being said, it's going to be entertaining because these guys are going to make mistakes. There's going to be a lot of weird plays. There's going to be a lot of just craziness. And it's going to be kind of like the old analogy around a train wreck. You just can't look away. I think it might just be one of the most incredible train wrecks of the week 4. And with both these teams moving the way that they are, it's going to be fascinating to see who has more energy in this one. I'll be totally honest with you. And then you got Tennessee OU. I feel like we have to talk about this one. We talked about how incredible it was before. It can't be said enough. An elite offense on one side with Tennessee, elite defense on the other side. Great atmosphere, players that can make absolutely huge plays, narratives around this game, including the quarterback of the national championship team in 2000 coming back as a head coach. So many big-time things going into this game. And I think it's going to be absolutely incredible. Cannot wait for this one. Definitely the game that I'm probably the most excited about going into this week, but the most fun one falls to Arizona State, Texas Tech. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but these are two teams that cannot stop a lot of people. Arizona State's a little bit better at it, but they're not necessarily great at it. And then Texas Tech on the other side did a good job against North Texas this past week, but overall have not been solid stopping anything. And I think this is one of those games that you're going to tune in, see, the score be 14-14 at one moment. You'll tune in about 5 minutes later, it'll be 28-28. It'll flip that quickly. This game is absolutely incredible and cannot wait to see how many points they're going to put up in this one. And then some other ones, Georgia Tech at Louisville, I think is going to be awesome. Rutgers going down to Blacksburg to play Virginia Tech is going to be great. And then obviously USC Michigan, just maybe not the most exciting approach in that game if I had to imagine. But it'll be interesting to watch that unfold. Let's take our last break here, and when we come back, we're going to do a little bit of a Hot Take Thursday, break down all of the hot takes I have for Week 4, including there's a game tonight that's going to be downright really, really fun, so we'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.